The big news surrounding the San Francisco 49ers is Brandon Aiyuk has reported to 49ers training camp. And obviously, that's a good sign with all the things that have been going on up until this point since last week's trade request. But this is also our first time to hear from John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan on the matter since mandatory minicamp back in early June. So we got an extensive conversation between the two. Obviously, reporters were asking him questions about this situation, and we got to hear their candid answers on the matter. So listen to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan right here go in depth about the situation that is ongoing with Brandon Aiyuk.
That Ayuk will be reported. Has Ayuk reported? Do you expect him to report if he hasn't?
Well, they still have another hour and change, until, so I don't know if he is here, but we expect all our players to report and be here.
Has there been any understanding with him that you will continue to negotiate? Is there any, to get?
We've had great communication. We started this really early. We made it a priority to try to get done. We've had excellent communication throughout. Really don't want to characterize. We haven't been able to, and that's a shame. But Brandon's a big part of our team, and we expect that he will be this year.
Is there a possibility that you do some sort of restructuring like you did with Raheem Mostert back in the past?
Everything's a possibility. We not gonna get into negotiations, and as Kyle says, there's no absolutes. So we're open to anything, and like I said, Brandon's a big part of this team, and we expect that he will be going forward.
Do you know yet whether he'll practice once he reports, or whether
We expect all our players to practice.
John, last year you gave us an absolute that Bosa would not be traded. Would you make that same statement about Brandon?
Well, Kyle and I always, we kind of, I did say that with Bosa, and I felt that way, but, I think, again, no absolutes there. We fully intend on Brandon being a Niner moving forward. We're always open to listen to things. But like I said, we expect Brandon to be an integral part of our team like he has been, and excited about that.
Kyle, Bosa mentioned last year that he thought maybe, obviously, a really long negotiation that did affect him during the season, saw his numbers go down. Debo has mentioned, during his contractual offseason that kind of threw off his season that followed. Are you concerned that this could happen with Ayuk or anybody, but specifically Ayuk?
Anytime don't get a practice like you're used to, and the NFL season's real hard. So anytime you don't really get prepared the right way in training camp, it's a challenge for all those players. And the tons of players have gone through it. Some have bigger challenges than others. Each one's different. I don't remember Debo missing much. I think we got him done the first couple days, from what I remember. Bosa just, the way a D lineman is, I think is a little bit different. But then getting in football shape, no matter how hard you work out, it's tough. It's tough to catch up throughout the season. So both of those guys have their individual experiences with it. It never helps, but it's something that's not a new thing. It's something you got to deal with.
Kyle, when Debo requested a trade a couple of years ago, you were asked why you were confident it would work itself out, and you said that you have a personal relationship with him, and you hadn't even talked to him yet. Why are you confident that you can work things out with Ayuk if things get bumpy?
I don't remember exactly. And knowing you, I don't know if I exactly said that, but I don't remember. But I have a personal relationship with all our players, and you like to be able to talk with those guys. And usually, when it does get close, it can work out. And I would feel the same with Brandon. I've known Brandon here for 4 years. I'm going in our 5th year together, and got a lot of love for BA. I think I'm close with them, and hopefully that can help, but it only can help so much. There's also a business side to it, and but when you do have relationships with people, it helps.
You've all been able to work at these huge contracts out for the star players like those in Depot in the past. Has this been one of the more challenging ones that you've faced since you've come to Santa Clara?
I think first of all, I think it's important to note we're fortunate to be in this position where we have a lot of talented players. So you have to have these conversations. This one has been challenging. As I said, we set it out. We started it earlier than we have in the past, made it a priority. And there's a lot of dynamics. I'm not going to get into all of them, but there's a lot of dynamics as to why it's been challenging. And, the 5th year option is something we all sign up for when you have a first round pick. And, That's been out there, but we've tried diligently to get this done. We haven't been able to get there. What I've learned from my past experiences for the last 7 years going into our 8th is that sometimes when you think there's no way this thing's going to progress, they do. Sometimes when you think all right, this thing's done tomorrow, it's not. So you just keep going. You stay in communication, and you understand that it's a business. I've been in their shoes. I know where they're at. I know the challenges. I take a lot of pride in having things done so that our team can focus on the job at hand. And it hurts me when that's not always done at this time of year, so I understand that. But again, I think we're in a fortune. We've got a lot of talented players, and we've rewarded a lot. So it does become more challenging in time when you've rewarded so many players. So, but that's also why this is a very good team that has such high expectations.
From the outside, it would seem like the amount of receivers that have signed around the league would maybe make it easier. Has it in fact actually made it harder? And is there concern that this is pushing the price to a place that you aren't willing to go?
No, I wouldn't say that. And again, I'm not going to get into the specifics. I think there's a privacy that is earned, and I always go back to I didn't like my business being aired out, so I'm not going to get into the specifics. There's certainly markets that happen and developments that happen that affect, but we also have our own roster, and like I said, we've rewarded a lot of players, so things do get more challenging. We put our best foot forward, but both sides have to come to agreement. We haven't been able to do that yet, and so where that goes, we'll see.
So although this is a good step, I would say, in the right direction to have Brandon Aiyuk in the building and be a part of teams, the meetings and all those different types of things, those are good things. We don't know if he's going to participate, but it does appear the expectation from John Lynch is that Brandon Aiyuk will be practicing. So we have to see if it's going to be a hold in. And even if Brandon Aiyuk does practice, that doesn't mean he can't still negotiate a contract. I think the fascinating part of this is if Brandon Aiyuk does practice, what is Brandon Aiyuk going to look like in practice? Because for the last 2 years, Brandon Aiyuk has been the best player throughout training camp, hands down. It's not even up for debate. He has been one of the biggest competitors when it comes to going out there at training camp. And a guy that's been through a lot of stuff this offseason and still going through that, but on a practice field, back in his element playing football. Hey, I would imagine Ayuk would be all the way turned up in that situation. You might see a very driven Brandon Ayuk in that scenario. So from that perspective, I would like to see that. But I also don't expect either, on the other hand, Brandon Ayuk to go out there based on, just potentially putting himself at risk of getting an injury. But that all comes into play. Is Brandon Aiyuk going to be playing on his 5th-year option? Is that the expectation? Is he going to get a deal? Still a lot of questions to be asked. And obviously you heard John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan go back and forth about the whole situation. And, I thought Tim Kawakami asked a good question about these negotiations dragging on into training camp. And you have heard players, you even had George Kittle talk about how much he hated contract negotiations. He said the whole process is terrible. And he said it's like having braces. You hate every minute of it, but the second you get it off, you forget you had them. He also said it helps when you have a big bag of money at the end of it. But, I mean, George Kittle spoke, and he's very crystal clear about how terrible this negotiation process is, and is it having longer term impacts psychologically to these players. Physical situations with Nick Bosa missing all of training camp. And again, I'm not in these meeting rooms, so I can't assign blame one way or the other. I just see the outcome. I just see what has transpired since. You hear the way players talk about it. It just sounds like an awful process altogether. And as a fan, I know you don't like this process. I've seen every single one of your comments. I've seen, the tide change in regards to what the frustrations are driven from. And so it's just a frustrating process when you boil it down to it. Player, team, fans. No one's winning until that contract is signed on the dotted line. And then we move on and we go on with our lives. But it clearly seems that there are some details that still need to be worked out. John Lynch was asked if potentially that a trade for Brandon Ayuk was on the table. He didn't give a definitive answer one way or the other. That is always typically done in a way to ensure that quotes don't come back and bite you later on. And when you hear him say there's no absolutes, I understand. It's essentially saying this is still a fluid situation. There are multiple outcomes that can happen. We don't know what that's going to be. We have an idea of what we want. We're going to keep that in house. We're going to keep it internally. But there's multiple options. There's multiple ways that this can play out. So we just have to see what those options, which option they pick. I think we all know the options, whether trades, playing on 5th-year options, getting tagged and trade at the end of that, getting an extension. The options are pretty crystal clear. It's just what option are we going to land on? That is the question. I'm curious to know what you guys think the 49ers and Brandon Ayuk will agree on. Is he going to be playing on the 5th-year option next year, or is he going to get a contract extension? Curious to know what you guys think about this. Curious to know what you thought about what they had to say about the situation. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more updates.